DiLaura Interactive Developers, Jack DiLaura here with the Interactive and Immersive HQ. In this video, we're going to take a look at utilizing a color management system called OpenColorIO in Unreal Engine 5. More commonly used in areas like film and virtual production, OpenColorIO actually can be used in a variety of different ways within Unreal Engine. And today we're going to use it with some external media. In this case, we're going to be using it to apply color conversion to textures that we've brought into the program so that they will more seamlessly blend in with the scene that we've generated in Unreal. On the left, we have an unprocessed texture from Cinema 4D. And on the right, we have applied our OpenColorIO based processing. And as you can see, it's brought out some of the original vibrancy of the image and also kind of adjusted the colors so that it blends and sits more seamlessly with the background. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I wanted to cover some important terminology and acronyms that we're going to be using throughout this video. First of all, OpenColorIO, OCIO for short, is the color management solution or plugin/tool set we're going to be using in Unreal Engine. And as we can see from the definition at the top, this is a solution geared towards motion picture production with an emphasis on visual effects and computer animation. OCIO provides a straightforward and consistent user experience across all supporting applications while allowing for sophisticated back-end configuration options suitable for high-end production usage. That's a lot of words for saying, essentially, this is a open source software framework that allows us to, regardless of which piece of software we're using, as long as it supports OpenColorIO, we can then access and utilize the different color profiles that we want to use. We're also going to be seeing the word ACES quite a bit. ACES stands for Academy Color Encoding Specification. And as we can see from the description, this is a global standard for interchanging digital image files, managing color workflows, and creating masters for delivery and archiving. So the difference here is that OpenColorIO is a software framework that keeps things consistent across different tools that we have available, whereas ACES is a standard, or a set of standards really, for the color fidelity itself. Next up, here are two color spaces that we'll be mentioning in this video. sRGB, also known as Rec. 709 Linear, is the default working color space in Unreal Engine and is a pretty commonly used color space. ACES CG, on the other hand, is a part of the ACES series of standards and is one of the options that is suited, as we can see from this description, specifically for rendering. So this would be a great choice if we were, say, exporting some content from Unreal Engine, maybe an animation or something like that. And then we're intending it to be used in some more traditional linear video editing software. There is a ton of very technical and also informative information out there on the web about all of these different topics, especially the differences between ACES and the sRGB color spaces that we just looked at. I will post the link to this page specifically in the description below, and you can take a look at the differences in output using those two different color spaces. Regardless, I just thought it'd be a good idea for you to have some familiarity with the terms that we'll be covering and access to some resources to explore it further yourself. We're going to start off this project by downloading some external files. This is going to be the quote-unquote footage that we're processing, which is basically just an image file. This is going to come from the Maxon website, who are the creators of Cinema 4D. They have an example file here, which we're going to utilize. So I'll have this link posted in the description below. You can head there and then come down to this compositing with ACES example.zip, which you'll want to click on and then download. Save that to a folder that you can find easily because you're going to need to import that into Unreal Engine later on. Next up, we're going to head into Unreal Engine and we'll begin by creating a new project. For this example, I'm going to use the blank option in the games category. I'm going to leave the settings over here basically the same, except that I will change the quality preset here to scalable because I don't particularly care about having the kind of maximum settings by default. And then I'm going to change the name of this as well. And we will call this OCIO. So that's OpenColorIO for short. And this will be an example. So EX_01. And then I will hit create. The first thing that we want to ensure once the project is opened up is that our OpenColorIO plugin is active. So I'm going to head up to the settings dialog here. I'm going to open up the plugins window, and then I'm going to type in OpenColorIO until we see this plugin here. I'm going to hit the checkbox next to it to enable it. It's going to give me a message saying that it is a beta version. I'll hit yes, and then I'm going to have to restart Unreal. Once Unreal has restarted, I'm going to type in OpenColorIO again, just to ensure that's been enabled. And with that, we can start putting our project together. So first off, I'm going to import the asset that we downloaded earlier. So go ahead and first make sure that you have exported or unzipped rather the contents of the zip file that we downloaded from the Maxon website. And then you're going to locate the .exr file within that folder. So this should be called acescg_ocio_example.exr. I'm going to left click and drag that into the Unreal Engine editor window, specifically onto the content browser, to import that into my project. Back in Unreal, I'm going to right click in the content browser to add some new content or assets to my project. I'm going to head to the miscellaneous category and then scroll down, and I should see the OpenColorIO configuration option. I want to point out that if we have not yet activated the OpenColorIO plugin, you won't see this in this miscellaneous folder. So if you're not seeing it there, double check that you've activated the plugin. I'm going to add that config file into the project. I'm going to call it OCIO_config, and I'll call this config01 in case you want to add a second one at any point. Then I can double click on that to open up an external window and edit the parameters here. We've got a default configuration file, which now comes with the program. You used to have to download this separately, but thankfully it's now bundled into the project. And then in this color space section, this is where we can define the different types of color spaces that we want to work with. So in this case, we're going to be thinking about both the source color space, that is the color space that the different assets that we're importing into our project were originally created with, and then the color space that we're going to be utilizing, say, within the project. So this is kind of like a source and a destination, we can think about it as. So we're going to be using this desired color spaces option here, and we're going to click add element, and we'll do that twice because we're going to have two different color spaces that we want to be able to utilize. Under the first drop down here, I'm going to go click that arrow, and then in the ACES category, I want the ACES CG option at the bottom. For our index number 1, I'm going to hit the same arrow and instead go to the utility category, where I'm going to choose linear rec 709 in parentheses sRGB. So the ACES CG option here is the color space that our asset here was originally created and exported using. And then internally in Unreal Engine, we're going to be working in this sRGB space. So those are the two that we're going to be adding in to this window. I'll then make sure that I hit Control S or this little save icon to save that. And then we're going to continue on by adding in a blueprint so that we can then utilize this new config within our scene. For the blueprint, I'm going to again right-click in the content browser and mouse up to the blueprint class option, which I'll click on. I'm just going to use the actor option for this. And I'm going to call this BP underscore OCIO and then underscore convert. Because we're going to be using this OpenColorIO configuration to basically convert between the color space that this asset was originally created with, and then convert it to our project's color space, which again is sRGB. So with that created, I'm going to double click on it to open up the Blueprint editor. I'll maximize this, and then I'm going to head straight to the event graph where we're going to do a little bit of work. We're going to start off by adding 3 different variables. And the first one is going to be called input texture. And for the variable type, I'm going to click on this drop down here and I'm going to type in texture. And we're going to have to scroll down in this dialog quite a bit until we just find the texture option here. And I want that as an object reference. So texture object reference, I'll click that. And then I'm going to click the little I on the right to make sure that this is a publicly accessible variable. Then I'm going to add a second variable, which is going to be called output texture. In this case, I don't want this to be a texture, but I want this to be something called a render target. And it looks like I accidentally clicked off of that. And I don't want this to be a render target 2D, but a texture render target 2D. And I want the object reference option for the texture render target 2D. So make sure here that this is texture render target 2D object reference instead of render target or any of these other options, as it won't work if you click the wrong option here. Again, I'm going to click the I on the right to make sure that this is a public variable. And finally, we're going to have something called conversion settings. And here I'm going to, again, choose a different type and type in OpenColor. And what I want is the OpenColorIO conversion settings, the first option that comes up here. Then I'm going to click the I again to make sure that that is a public variable. And from there, I'm going to start dragging these variables onto our node graph so that we can use them to create some functionality. I'll start by dragging input texture onto the graph and hit the get input texture option. I'll do the same for output texture and also for conversion settings. Now I've put conversion settings at the top because the node that we're going to use, the pins are in this particular order. From there, I'm going to right click in the node graph to add an additional node, and this is going to be called our color space transform. So apply color space transform is what we're looking for here. And I'll start off by connecting the execute pin from the event tick node. So I'll connect that first. Then I'm going to want to connect my conversion settings to the conversion settings input there, input texture to the input texture, and then output texture to the output render target. I'll then hit compile and save, and we can head back to the main Unreal window. To use this within our scene, this new actor that we've set up in the blueprint, we're going to drag this into our scene. And then we're going to have to do a little bit of additional work because we need something for this to, first of all, a render target for this to render to, and then an actual actor within the scene to apply that render target as a texture to. So first up, I'm going to head to the content browser, right click in the background. I'm going to type in render target. And we'll see here we have a couple of options under texture. I'm going to use the render target option that we see here, the fourth one down. This is going to be our render target. So I'll just say render target 2D. And then from there, I'm also going to add in the object to our scene. So to add it into the scene, I'm going to use the quickly add to the project option up here. And under the shapes category, I'm going to add in a plane. For the plane, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to rotate the plane and then change the scale of the plane so that it will give us the correct aspect ratio of the input image. And then we're going to have to also follow suit with the aspect ratio on the render target as well. But we'll start with the rotation. That is going to need to be rotated by 90 degrees on the x-axis. And then I believe, let's see, is it 90 degrees on z, or no, negative 90 degrees on z to make sure that that is facing towards us. I already know that this input texture is 1920 by 1080. However, if you don't know or have a different texture that you're working with, you can always mouse over it to look at the dimensions. What that means in terms of my scale here in a more, what we'd call a normalized range, is that if my height is 1, the width would be 1.777. And that's just a 16 by 9 aspect ratio put into this normalized 0 to 1-ish range. So I've got the 16 by 9 aspect ratio set up on my plane. I can then click and drag my render target 2D onto the plane to set it up as a material and then assign that material to the plane. Now, nothing is going to happen yet if I hit play because we haven't yet done anything. We haven't told our blueprint that we've set up any of the whether the input texture, the output, or the conversion settings that we need to work with in order to provide this render target with any information. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to click on the BP_OCIO_convert object in the outliner. And then I'm going to come down to the default section here, which has those public variables that we set up. So for the input texture, I know that I'm going to be using this EXR file we brought in from those assets we downloaded. So I'm going to click and drag this onto the input texture option. And then the output texture, which really is our render target, is the render target 2D object. So I'm going to drag that onto the output texture. Then under conversion settings, we can see right now it says invalid conversion. That's okay. We're going to click this arrow here to expand that and show us some additional options. So here for the configuration source, we need to provide our config file that we set up earlier. So I'm going to click and drag that onto the configuration source. And then here we can provide a transform source color space and a transform destination color space. So for the source, I know that this file coming in uses the ACES CG option, so I'm going to use that. And then for the output, the destination, I want to convert this to sRGB, as this again is like the default color space within Unreal. Once I've done that, I can hit play, and I should see that we've got the texture appearing now on our plane. Now let's get closer to this texture and we'll see, it looks a little pixelated. If we remember, this is a 1920 by 1080 texture. So, that's not exactly a correct representation of that texture. And that's because our render target has not yet been set up quite right. So I'm going to click on the render target here to open it up in another window. And you'll see here that we have under the details section here, a texture render target 2D section, which has some size options. Now we know again that this is a 1920 by 1080 texture. So what I'm going to do here is to set the size X to 1920 and the size Y to 1080. We're not going to see anything at the moment as we need to head back into the play mode in order for that to start functioning again. So once we do that, we can see there it is. Looks great. I'm going to close this now after saving. And we should see now, even when we're in this pause state, we can, let's see if I can get a little bit closer. Oops. Well, not quite. There we go. And now it's looking much sharper overall. So that's great. So that's it for utilizing a blueprint to apply an OpenColorIO based color space conversion. However, if you are still interested in comparing the kind of initial state of this texture as it's imported into the program with what we are seeing here in this final version, we can always simply copy and paste this plane. Now we've got two planes over top of one another, and I will move the second plane to the left, and then hopefully try to get a somewhat centered view here. But with the default settings, I'm kind of flying around the screen a little bit. Then I'm just going to take this texture as it was imported into the program and drag it onto this leftmost option. And we can see immediately the same sort of example that we saw at the beginning of the video. So as it is imported, because we're not taking advantage of or taking into account the fact that we have a different color space that needs some conversion, we've got a much more kind of washed out, dull, less saturated version of the original texture. And you can see that on the right, our color space conversion really does have a pretty big impact on the way that this looks. So, this doesn't necessarily only have to be applied to things like, pre-rendered content like we see here. We could also be dealing with things like live feeds from professional video cameras for things like virtual production, or of course, footage from a camera itself as well. But hopefully this example gives you an idea of, why these are useful tools to have in your tool set and how they can actually have a big impact on the way things look. So with that said, I hope you've enjoyed putting this one together. Looking forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.
Hey folks, thanks for watching. If you like our YouTube content, I highly recommend you check out the Interactive and Immersive HQ Pro. The HQ Pro is the only comprehensive educational resource and community for immersive design, touch designer, and creative tech pros. In the HQ Pro trainings, we cover almost any topic you can think of, and we go way more in depth than we do in our YouTube tutorials. We have a private group where Matthew Reagan, myself, and our other industry veteran and pioneer teachers answer your questions every single day. If that sounds cool, click the link in the description to learn more. And if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more free touch designer and immersive content.